Just one more piece, and done. Wiping the tip of soldering iron, Pokerona set the tool on a stand. Standing up, pleased with a job well done, he wiped his brow. Glancing over at the clock, he sighed. It would be over an hour since he started tinkering with his latest creation. But there was one final thing he still had to do. Lifting the visor-like contraption, the fuchsia's bad pony checked the wiring for the umpteenth time. His pupils contracted to razor-thin slits as his thumb hovered over the activation button. Ensuring the battery was properly seated, taking a deep breath, he turned it on. A pair of small screens within the device winked it to life. Text scrolled over the miniature displays, while the onboard diagnostics came online, before they came to a flat blue ready state. Pumping his fist, grinning triumphantly, Pokerona carefully set the gizmo on the table. He would be fiddling with the headset for weeks. After fishing it out of a bin outside of an electronics shop down the street, it had been a virtual reality headset, though someone had thrown it away as a capacitator had blown in it. Fixing the shorted wiring and replacing the component had been relatively easy, returning it to a functional state. But that hadn't been good enough. No, he had plans for the little apparatus. Picking it back up, slipping it over his fluffy oversized ears, Pokerona went to don his newest toy. Yet he faltered. With his enthusiasm almost having gotten the better of him, he rubbed his chin. If it worked properly, and he prayed it did, he would need someone to test it on. Given that his parents were gone for the weekend, and with his friends living across town, he was left with one option.
Sis! Sis! He shouted, turning towards the door of the family garage turned in workshop. Waiting for a moment, listening for any signs of movement, he knit his brow. Sis, help me! I'm having a seizure and I'm dying! If you don't... He yelled, beating the table for a dramatic effect. What? A voice hollered from within the home proper. Dying! Burn my things and send my ashes to Luna! Pocahontas rebunked it. If you're not dying, I swear I'll fix that shortly, the voice returned, drawing nearer. Impatiently tapping his hoof, hearing a series of muttered cursing growing closer, Pokerona waited. In less than a minute, a mute face appeared in the doorway. The mayor's amethyst eyes scanned the room. Before settling upon him, she didn't move, choosing instead to leer at him from a disdain from afar. Thank goodness that the horrible seizure ended so conveniently, Pokerona exclaimed, theoretically wiping his brow. But since you're here, would you mind volunteering for something? Poca, I swear to Luna, I'm going to wring your scrawny neck, she groaned, rolling her eyes and walking over to him. Much like himself, Seal Knight was a bad pony, slender, reclusive, and charmingly pithy. She was 5 minutes younger than Pokerona. Being his only sibling, the two spent a good bit of time together, although it wasn't always sunshines and rainbows. As brother and sister, it wasn't uncommon for them to bicker and squabble, especially because they shared a great many interests. Solitary and nerdy, they often contentedly spent their time at home together instead of going out to socialize. So, since you're neither dead nor dying, what do you want, Poca? She asked, studying the workbench's contents. Here, just put this on. Poca began moving to place his invention on his sister's head. batting his hand away. Seal Knight took a step back. No, why? What is it? She rebunked, squinting at him. It's, just a VR headset. I wanted to surprise you with it, he hesitantly admitted, flashing her with a fang-filled smile. He doubted she would buy it, but if it's a VR set, why don't you try it on first? She countered, taking a second step backwards. She placed her hands on her hips. It's just for calibration, Polka grunted, shrugging his shoulders. If you try it on, I'll let you have my portion of leftover pizza in the fridge. He hastily added, paying a bit of bait as incentive. Reaching out, snatching it from her brother's grip, Seal inspected the device, looking it over, noting the additional components, which had been soldered or bolted into place. She glanced over at him. If you promise to get me a mango smoothie, fine. Fine, sure, I promise, the stallion relented, giving her a defeated shrug. Having committed his leftovers and a bit of meager cash, he dearly hoped that the damn thing would work as intended. It wasn't like he had much money, having just graduated high school, so it was a bit of a gamble. Still, if it did function, it would be well worth the investment. Nodding, sliding the contraption onto her head. Seal Knight flipped the visor over her eyes. Alright, go ahead, but there better not be porn on this, stupid. She trailed off as she gazed into the inbuilt displays. Swirling patterns of colors and lights danced before her, accompanied by a curious humming noise, causing her to lose focus. The intentions in her limbs bled away. Her ears and wings twitched fitfully, and her mouth hung open. She wavered in place as her knees buckled slightly, yet she remained standing. Seal, Polka whispered, watching his sister's jaw go slack. Seal Knight, he repeated, as her arms hung limply to her side. Yes, he responded flatly, unmoving. What is your directive? He asked, a finished smirk creeping over his face. To serve, Seal mumbling stated. Duration? Polka pressed it. Level 1, testing phase, 30 minutes, she replied, flipping the visor up. He examined her face. Your orders? She inquired, with a dreamlike glazed over look in her eyes. Yes! Yes! The stallion whooped, grinning like an idiot. As soon as he found the abandoned contraption, that he would be able to test something he'd always dreamt of. For years, the notion of hypnosis had fascinated him, although he lacked the means to experiment with. With a few friends and who filmed social skills, any sort of traditional mesmerism was impossible, though the piece of technology changed everything.
Virtual reality, when paired with very specific software, is a much more fitting option for him. With a careful administration of fluid patterns and auditory input, the brain could be tricked into a semi-consciousness state, allowing others to heavily influence their actions. Given his penchant for technology and electrocutional engineering, it was the perfect fit. With his twin sibling under his spell and having roughly half an hour to test the effectiveness of his curation, Polka thought for a moment. He would make a few plans in the event of his experiment was successful, so he knew just what he was going to do. Walking past her, moving towards the exit, he waved her forward. Seal, please follow me, he ordered, peeking over his shoulder, ensuring Seal was behind him. He proceeded onward. Through the house, up the stairs, Polka strolled towards his room. It didn't take them too long to reach their destination, with the stallion ushering his sister inside. Walking in, shutting the door behind himself, he took the stock of his surroundings. His room, as would be expected, was fairly unremarkable for a teenage bad stallion. With a few expectations, cinematics and posters adored the walls, including a rather questionable one of the mare in a painfully small bikini. Clothes were strewn about the floor, with a large heap sitting in a corner. It may have been a bit messy, but he knew exactly where everything was. Were it not for their parents' occasional gripping, he would likely clean even less often than he already did. In there, on the floor, there's a package. After you take off the headset, can you get that for me? Poco chuckled, pointing towards the closet. Seeing her move towards his wardrobe, once she would set the visor on his dresser, he snatched his phone from the nightstand. With what he had in store for his sibling, he would have to get some photographic evidence, if only to taunt or blackmail her later. Glancing up, noticing Seal had retrieved a small cardboard box, he cleared his throat. Open it, and put the outfit on, he instructed, making himself comfortable on the mattress. Shuffling backwards, resting his back against the headboard, he pulled his pillows aside. That was until he looked up. Some dozen paces away, Seal Knight stood, bare from the waist up, with her hands dripping to her waist. Utterly shocked, gazing upon her flat chest and indigo nipples, Poco couldn't look away. He watched like a deer in the headlights, as her skirt fell to the floor, until she turned, bent over, and began drawing her panties down her thighs. Then he found his voice. What the hey are you doing? He bluttered, ineffectually covering his face. I'm changing as you instructed, master, Seal muttered, undressing herself. Reaching into the box, pulling out a maid's uniform. She started slipping the garment over her head. I didn't say do it here, Poco gasped, peeking between his fingers as he felt his cheeks redden. The get-up, a costume he bought after a Nightmare Night sale, had originally been meant for one of his friends, though it fit his sister almost perfectly. The black and white stain castrated her light purple coat especially well. As it settled on her selective frame, truth be told, she looked rather good in it. Far better than Master, Seal asked, snapping him from his reverie. Are there not any undergarments? She purred, grasping the hem of her skirt. With startling nonchalance, she lifted the article and exposed her nuthers. Arching her back, she brazenly showed off her groin and darkened lower lips. I... Poco sputtered, his eyes locked on her sister's naughty bits. Despite himself, his stallion hood stern with his trousers, it was the first time he would see a marehood in person, regardless of the fact that Seal was his sister, so his body was quick to respond. Waving his hand, practically forcing himself to avert his gaze, he was finally able to look away. Just tidy up a bit, or something, he squatted, discarding the phone. Scrunching his snout, Poco peered at the floor in concentration. Clearly, he would made a miscalculation with the glaring lack of underwear and the non-existent shame of his sister exhibited. The easiest solution would be to have her put the panties back on, so that the option he decided to go with. Seal, I want you... His words died in his throat as he looked up at her sister. Bent over, gathering a number of dirty socks, her rear was angled directly at him. Beneath the relatively short fabric of her outfit, the twin globes of her rump were clearly visible. Askance, noting the barest glimpse of her sex, she glanced over her shoulder at him, stood and casually walked over. "What do you want, master?" Seal inquired, stopping within arm's reach. Clutching her hands into her bosom, awaiting patiently, she stared down at him. I want... Poco gulped, kneeling unaware of his uncomfortable erection. "Yes," she softly pressed, unmoving. I would like you to service me?" he croaked, trying and failing to sound authoritative. "How should I serve you, master?" Seal asked, cocking her head to the side. "Oh, for..." Poco groaned, drawing a palm over his face. "I meant sexually." "Ooh, man, it's about to go down." Without a word, Seal Knight leaned in place, a hand on his groin. Defiantly stroking the tentacle fabric, her fingers wandered upward and undid the button. Slowly, methodically, she unzipped his fly of his jumpsuit, allowing his garnet-colored length to leap free. Turning her head, locking eyes with him, she grimly wrapped her digits around his shaft. Her soft touch sent a shiver of pleasure up Poco's spine as she slowly began stroking his stallion hood. As a virile youth, he was very acquainted with getting himself off, although this was worlds apart. Soft and delicate, her hand was nothing like his own, leaving him to sigh contentedly. Snatching up a pillow, jamming it behind his head, he closed his eyes. Simply knowing he was getting a hand job from his sister was disconcerting enough. But that didn't mean he had to watch her doing it. Fantasizing about a box-mount mare, he rested his arms to his sides and relaxed it. Just as he was becoming comfortable with the sensation, it stopped. Cracking one eye open, checking to see what was the matter, Poco went rigid. Not due to what he saw, but because of the warm, moist feeling which enveloped his member. Bolting upright, stunned beyond belief, he was greeted by the sight of Seal's lips firmly wrapped around the tip of his length. Pushing her head forward, drawing him into her mouth, his stallion hood disappeared into her snout. Caught off guard, his surprise was countered by the feeling of adrift bliss her mouth afforded. A hand, his own, or otherwise, paled in the comparison to the divinity of her lips and tongue. Subconsciously, Poco reached forward and caressed Seal's orchid-colored mane. She hummed it around his tool, though her eyes never wavered from his. Sweet Luna, why was it so enchanting? She was his twin sister, his own flesh and blood, yet there she was, with his dick in her grub. Rubbing her ear, she subtly pushed her head downward. A stifled gag escaped Seal, as the head of Poco's dick powdered the back of her throat, immediately removing his hand, allowing her to withdraw. He leaned towards her, scandalous shenanigans aside. He would rather not cause her any discomfort. Sorry about that," he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. Shaking her head, Seal coughed lightly and pushed him backward. Slightly, she rested one knee on top of the mattress, while drawing her hand up to his torso. Swinging one leg over his waist, straddling him, she crawled up the bed towards his face, bringing her waist above his, dragging her sex over his tracted shaft. His stallion hood sprang between her buns. "Master," she began as her snout crept towards his, "please allow me to continue servicing you." Alright," he blunted, as the undeniable heat of her loins taunted his crotch. Smiling, eyeing herself with his cock, she rocked herself back as he bumped against her entrance. Poco's body ached of instinct, thrusting upwards, burying the first inch or so of himself into her snug canal. The siblings gasped and went ragged. Frozen in place, their eyes rested upon one another. Seal was the first to move. With her arms braced, she gradually started fucking herself on Poca. With each plunge, a bit more of his stallion hood sank into her confines. As she steadily screwed herself on him, as startling as her enthusiasm was, it was eclipsed by the uncontested bliss of her brother was feeling. Lying on his back, staring into her sister's eyes, Poca's face confronted in ecstasy. All the other pornos and dirty magazines he would read had been true. It honestly felt like he was melting. Hot, tight, and astonishingly, her silken interior was like heaven given flesh. Sure, it was slightly confusing that she would thrust herself on him with such zeal, but he was hardly going to complain. Esther. Seal brokenly groaned, causing her brother to focus. Placing a palm on his chest, she pushed herself into a seated position. Kneeling over his waist, she brushed her mane aside and grabbed at the top of her outfit, lifting her arms, dragging it off her slender torso. She tossed the costume aside, as if the new position wasn't extraordinarily arousing. She bore an absolutely sensible expression. Enjoying the view, Seal purred, running her fingers down her neck, between her breasts and to her groin. She started bouncing on his member. Bowing her back, steadying herself on one arm, she relucted and massaged her kilt. With an unpretended shot of the action, Poca watched his length rapidly appear and disappear from her depths. It was without a doubt the hottest thing I've ever seen, he roughly whispered. Shakily, Poca reached out and grabbed her hips. She would have been doing almost all the work. Since they began, so he felt inclined to replicate. Bucking upward, earning a moan from his sister, he began thrusting into her. Fortunately, it only took him a handful of seconds to get their movements synchronized. The air was filled with the sound of heavy breaths and their bodies colliding, the rhythmic plop, plop, plop of flesh upon flesh. While cavitating was a bit disconcerting to Poca. True, but he was but a carnal neophyte. But every dirty video he would ever include sympathy of bestial noises and lusty admissions. Talk dirty, Poca insisted, latching to the notion. Oh, Luna, yes, Seal cried out, fucking herself on her brother with reckless abandon, dropping herself over his chest, seasonally meeting his pounding waist. She dragged her tongue up his neck and to his jaw. Poca, you feel amazing, she mewed, biting his ear. Oh, jeez, the stallion sheepishly stammered. Her added admission, paired with her surprisingly vigorous fucking, caused his movements to flatter. Something may have gone wrong with his experience, considering she had grown increasingly forceful and energetic as their time went on. Sadly, any attempts at determining what the problem was were stemmed. When she sunk her fingers into his mane, ow, Poca's protest was cut off when Seal pressed her muzzle against his. Her tongue warmed past his lips, into his mouth, and began lashing about. Dumbfounded by the passionate assault, he didn't feel Seal's free hand sneaking under his back. Until it was too late, holding him tightly, she threw all her weight to the side and rolled him on top of herself. Now, in some exploration of a missionary position, She locked her legs around his waist, but she wasn't done yet. Grabbing his collar, pushing him away, Seal glared up at her brother. Knitting her brow, she stared daggers at her twin and flexed her legs, drawing him deeper into her cunt. Polka had no doubt something had gone horribly awry. "Fuck me, you stud," she demanded, releasing her skirt, pulling a pillow under her head, and began gently twisting and tweaking one nipple. Stealing his resolve, shoveling into position, Polka started running her in earnest. Thankfully, she loosened her legs slightly, giving him a bit more freedom of movement. Seeing the sulkish look on her face, while he bestowed into her, sparked an odd determination on him. Now that he was on top, in spite of her sister's strange domineering act, he felt in control. Grabbing her below the knees, with one hand, he quickly unbuttoned the front of his jumpsuit. With the garment hanging open over his chest, he hauled her legs upward, casting her head to the side, moaning loudly. Seal's eyes fluttered, her wings pinned to her back, twitched and strutted. Apparently, some part of her approved of the rough treatment. Yeah, you like that, don't you? Dirty slut," Polka boldly declared, attempting to sound assertive. "Yes, fuck me harder, you nerdy bastard," she hogged, gyrating her hips. Emboldened by the situation, sputtered by just how astonishing her marehood was, Polka thrusting turned up a notch, pawing her like a field in spring. His plump, furry nuts slapped against her backside. Honestly, he couldn't decide where to look. Seal Knight's face was twisted in rapture. Her beast-like natch plunged into his shaft on the backstrokes, and she would begin rubbing her kilt again. Hypnotic suggestion or not, he couldn't have founded his sister was capable of, such as O-Sense display. Between the debanterous show, the heavenly sensations of her sex, and the taboo act itself, he found himself roaring between release. Oh, fuck. I don't think I can. Polka disjointedly fumbled over his words as the telltale signs of his climax hit him. "Come inside me," Seal screamed. Her chest heaved, while her fingers savagely toyed with her nipples and kilt. Raising her waist, bucking up into him, her thighs trembled fiercely. She was about to pop, judging from what Polka had seen and read of mares. So he felt compelled to oblige her. At least, that's what he told himself. The truth of the matter was, like it or not, he lacked the willpower to stop. Polka came to an abrupt halt, as he was runting her like a colt on prom night, when he hilted himself, cramming every vascular inch of his tool within her. He was rocked by the most intoxicating pleasure he would ever known. Grunting wildly, gritting his teeth, the first shots of cum surged through his shaft. As the sunline heated of her brother's seed crashed against her cervix, Seal came, screaming to the moon, withering of his glorious cock. She consulted. Acting of its own, her cunt clamped around his member, trapping what it could. But to no avail, nectar and seed gushed from her marehood, escaping from around Polka's flare. With their bodies entwined, the duo rowed out their orgasmatic bliss. Polka, still situated above his sister, leaned forward and pressed himself against her chest. Her hand glided over his back to sweetly caress his wings and shoulders. breathing heavily with the post-curious empathy settling over them. They shared the embrace, though it was short-lived. I wish we would done that sooner, Seal croaked, rubbing her face against her sibling's collar. Nuzzling him, she gently stroked his cheek and mane. Yeah, that was... What? Polka yelped, her ambition kicking his higher functions into overdrive. If she could talk, she could think. If she could think, then she wasn't really hypnotized. Grabbing her shoulders, pushing himself up slightly, he stared at her in a panic. You were conscious? Seal shrugged and rolled her eyes. Are you that surprised? Yes, you are darn right I am, he frankly replied, holding his hands to his face. Oh, sweet Luna, what have I done? Calm down. You only made a few minor miscalculations, Seal grumbled, shoving him to the side, causing him softening stallionhood to escape from her. She rolled to the side of the bed. Crawling over, swinging her legs over to the side of the bed, she got to her feet. A small stream of spunk flowed from her snatch, trailing down her leg as she briskly walked over to the dresser. She only stopped it when she had the headset in her hand, holding it aloft and pointing at the control box. For starters, the Delta and Theaca binaural processes weren't synchronized properly. Secondly, and this is a hunch, I think the video feed was a delay. I might be wrong, but the frame rate should be higher. Lastly, her explanation grounded to a halt as her brother waved frankly at her. Wait, Polka stammered, pushing himself up. So, you're not mad that I asked you to... Oh. He tailed it off, pointing to his cum-slick package. Okay, maybe you are a dumber than I thought, Sleep muttered, snatching up a set of modeling tools from his desk. I'm going to go out on a limb and guess most of what you watched was porn. He began shifting uncontrollably in pace. Yeah. So first thing, hypnosis only acts as a sort of suggestion, she explained, definitely popping open the access panel of his headset. So basically, you can't force someone to do something that they don't want to do. So you wanted to do that with me? Polka asked, taken aback. She paused briefly, shooting him a wink, before carefully inserting a pair of needle nose pliers into the contraption. Then why didn't you tell me beforehand? Because, you dweeb, it was a perfect setup. I let you hypnotize me, we do the nasty, and both get some relief. Even if we did get caught, I have plenty of possible deniabilities. Considering you made me do it, she teased, intentionally fiddling with the gizmo in herds. You cheeky devil, Polka chuckled, strolling over to her. You get what you want without any risk attached. Why didn't I think of that? Well, probably because I'm smarter than you. Heck, I would have gotten this done right in the first place, Seal smugly tutted, retracting the tools. Closing the compartment of the headset, dusting it off, she gave it a second examination. Holding it in one hand, she turned to her brother and patted his shoulder. Buck naked, leaking cum, and just a bit sore, Seal smiled up at him, while she brought up the device over his head. His body flooded with dampened, confused by the bizarre turns of events. Polka didn't notice what his sister was doing until it was too late, the hard plastic causing slips over his eyes, filling his vision with a mass of swirling, undilatingly colors and shapes. A strange, otherworldly humming filled his ears, opening his mouth, feeling his muscles going slack. His mind went blank. Giving him a moment, seeing his body relax, Seal Knight flipped the visor up. Directive? To serve. Polka eventually stated, gazing into nothingness. Tit for tat. Balance as all things should be, Seal said to herself, grinning broadly, picking up the discard maid outfit. As she skipped over to the bed, she tossed it to him. Strip down and put that on, she continued, cocking one leg up. Drawing her fingers over her sex, feeling the warm sticky pun coat her digits, she spread herself open. Then come over here and clean your mess. The end.